This is A Geek Leader. Hey guys, John Ryder backing in with episode 73 of A Geek Leader podcast, and today on the show we've got Heather Wilde. She's the CTO of ROCeteer, and she was the 8th employee of Evernote. She oversaw the growth of that company. You all know what Evernote is. You probably all have it on your phone or your iPad or both. But she saw the growth of that go from thousands of users to over 100 million users, which is pretty incredible. She's published some popular video games. She's trained several Fortune 500 brands, advised hundreds of startups, and even managed nonprofits. And one of the cool things she's doing right now, she tours around and speaks at different conferences. You probably heard her speak if you're listening to this podcast, but if not, definitely check her out. We'll link some talks and things up in the show notes. But she's helping organize a conference in Antarctica, which is pretty awesome. We're going to talk a little bit about that at the end of the show, so make sure you stay tuned and listen for that. And with all that being said, please give it up for Heather Wilde. Heather, how are you doing? Welcome to the show. If you don't mind, tell the audience a little bit about how you got started in technology and how that's progressed through your career and what you're working on right now.
Oh, well, I'm old, so it's a long story, but I'll make it short. When I was a kid, I was always fascinated with technology. I always had Legos and Matchbook cars growing up, not Barbie dolls. And my grandmother once told me, "Oh, you're going to grow up to be an engineer." And I was like, I don't like trains. I don't understand what. But my uncle was an airline pilot, and my dad was an accountant on Wall Street, and so like there was a lot of math that I was surrounded by. So when computers came into my life, like 1984 was a very seminal year in my life, because not only was it that like the big year for Apple, it was the year I got my own computer at home. It was an IBM PC Junior, and I just fell in love. I took the thing apart, which made my dad really angry because I was an 8-year-old with pieces all over the place. But I put it back together. I learned how to program it, and that became the first love of my life. So I then spent probably every waking hour for the next 35 years of my life with computers. I would program, I would solder, I would build things. Radio Shack was the store that I spent the most amount of time in, just buying transistor kits. I would go to flea markets and pick up like old junk, broken things, just so I could get parts to build more stuff. And then I went from, like, when I was in college, I wanted to be an astronaut because I loved space. And I mean, my uncle was a pilot, so I knew flying was cool and all, but it wasn't as cool as going up into space. But that didn't work out, unfortunately. But my background in building all sorts of stuff was something that NASA was really interested in. So I did that for a bit until I got into game design. And then my career took off from there, working, building games for THQ. Actually, one of those is being re-released for its 20-year anniversary, like the next week, which is cool.
Oh, wow.
And then some friends and I started a company called Evernote.
Yeah, wow. So where you're at right now, what you've talked about is kind of like every geek's dream, work for NASA, make video games, and found a company like Evernote.
Yep. Yeah.
So what happened after that?
So an interesting thing about Evernote is, by the time I got to that part in my career, I'd already done quite a bit, and I had been working in offices for probably about 10 years or so, and I was like, I don't feel like working in an office anymore. So I got myself a sailboat and I moved to Mexico. And so when we were beginning the Evernote journey, I was actually living on a sailboat in Mexico while building that company up with our friends. And
that sounds like a Tim Ferriss book.
Yeah. I actually have written a book about it. I just haven't released it yet. I do write quite a bit. I just, I haven't gotten that one out the door yet. But yeah, it was a lot of work. It was a lot more than a 4-hour work week. Let me tell you, it was, I don't know how he does that. But he was actually one of the earlier investors in Evernote too. But we were on the sailboat, me and my husband at the time, working, 7 days a week, probably 16 to 18 hours a day. And it was grueling. It was difficult. We did that for 6 years. And then at the end of that, we both burned out totally. So chose to leave Evernote and start our own things. So that's where I am now. I'm working as the CTO of a company called ROCeteer, where I work as a fractional CTO for other companies that need a boost, other ones that want to be like Evernote, or even just want to be sustainable, that are in transition from one phase of their company to another, that don't need a full-time CTO. And other people in my company fill similar roles, like CMO, CXO, just similar roles in companies. We give them a boost during their transition period. And then we also work by teaching workshops and giving coaching and things like that. And along that journey, I got certified as a coach in 5 different methodologies, which was really beneficial because as an engineer, I didn't always have the best social skills. So this taught me a lot of things that were important, like empathy, and how to react when other people are breaking down, and also how to notice things like burnout signs in myself so that won't happen again. So that brings us up to today.
Yeah. So talking about empathy, that's one of the things that I also struggle with kind of as a leader, is to put myself in other people's shoes. And it's one of those things that you have to really work hard on if it doesn't come natural to you. And I think some people don't realize that it's something that they need to work on. They just assume that, I don't have empathy, and so I don't have it.
When I was going through all of these, it was about 2 years worth of training. I just kept using the cop-out statement of, I have low EQ. And I was like, I'm an engineer, I have low EQ. And everyone was like, that's stupid. We've seen you cry. We've seen your eyes tear up when you talk about certain things. We've seen you get passionate about stuff. So you don't have low EQ. You're just lazy. When put in that perspective, I realized that they were absolutely right. I was just not doing the work. Like I was happy to do the work about things I was interested in, but I just was being selfish and kind of narcissistic about other people's feelings. And that was just a big slap in the face, because I'd realized that I'd gone my entire life only being interested in the things that interested me, which, I mean, that makes a certain amount of sense, but for most other people, they actually are genuinely interested in like how other people feel. And like, because I'd spent all of that time talking to my computer as my friend, and my computer doesn't feel.
No, I get that completely. I know one of the things that I've always tried to do as a leader is to hire the skills that I'm bad at. Yeah. And knowing that I was bad at empathy and bad at some of that customer service things that we really need to have when we're in technology, I hired someone that was really good at those things, thinking that, now I can just offload this. Yeah. What I found is it actually means I have to work harder now to make sure that relationship's good, and then I can understand that person. So I've done a couple of small things to try to help my empathy. But what are some tips that you have for people to become more empathetic if they struggle with that?
So the first thing is stop talking when other people are, it's more, actually, it's not really stop talking. It's more be an active listener. So when somebody else is talking, stop waiting for your chance to talk, and also talk slower. So when you are speaking, make sure that the things that you are saying are more measured and that you're thinking before you say something. Because I know a lot of engineers like myself, we just say the first thing that comes off the top of our head without even pausing to reflect to see if that's the right thing to say. And a lot of times we're not reading the room to see if we should even be speaking at all. So, and it doesn't always work, but if you're speaking slower, then you can like stop yourself from saying something before the words actually come out, because you'll notice that like the what you're saying doesn't land or is landing the wrong way with the people around you.
Yeah, I think I agree 100%. And one of the things I try to do, and I listen to podcasts at a faster rate at like 2x, so I can try to comprehend things at 2x. But when I speak, I try to speak at 1x or half x when I'm talking to a group, so that my words resonate more with them, or that I can kind of gauge, facial reactions or body language, whether they're crossing their arms and, oh, this is not going over very well or something.
Yeah. And other people may be like, why are you speaking so slowly? And it is definitely a crutch that I have to do. But then again, when I'm in another country, people respect it more and are really happy that I'm doing it, because they have to actually translate the words that I'm saying. So they're really happy that I'm speaking more slowly. But it's really, it's a really useful tool, especially because, at my age, I realized I wasn't socialized in the same way that a lot of other kids my age were. However, the children growing up right now, like your kids, will grow up exactly the same way that I was, because their emotional response is coming from a cell phone, and their entire life, their emotional response is going to, like, their best friend will be a screen.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And one of the things that I've noticed with, I think it was Simon Sinek, he gave a talk about millennials that kind of went viral maybe a year or two ago. And it wasn't to blame things on millennials for the communication. It was to say that we need to understand that they grew up in a different era. And that, whereas we may have had to call someone, like I think about when I went on my first date, it was like I had to pick up the phone and call, and I talked to the person's mom for a few minutes and like ask permission to talk to her, and it was really an awkward situation, but I had to navigate those waters of talking to people face to face and trying to pick up on vocal tonality and those kind of things. Whereas, when my son or daughter get up there, it may just be as simple as a swipe.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so difficult for people right now to bridge that gap. So if you're around the if you're in the range of like 35 to 45, you're in the range of somebody that was in the transition of like computer versus not computer, like somebody that used to play outside versus not. And even though I'm at the higher end of that range, like because I got my computer so early, because I had a modem so early, because I didn't go outside, I basically am just like the younger part of that range. Like I skew millennial in a lot of ways, and it is almost torture for me to have to talk to somebody on the phone. I would rather do everything with an app. I always have been like that. I was an early adopter for email, and the world is constantly doing it like that. But that also, as a CTO, that makes me more in tune with what kind of things need to be developed. And whenever I am talking to people at conferences and leading like a keynote or something, like I know intuitively what the future kind of things are going to be developed. So that's why I end up speaking so much because I just kind of know, okay, well, this is going to hit. This one's not going to work. And I also can really, even if it's not exactly empathy, I can put myself in the shoes of the customer, of what people are really going to want, that customer experience, because the majority of the customers out there, the majority of the people out there are really trending towards a certain thing. And it's a changing world.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's definitely a changing world. And I think you're absolutely right by having that ability to put yourself in the perspective of, I don't want to say the younger generation, but I guess a group that has a different mindset, a different outlook on the way products should work and things should work than maybe some of the older leaders in our companies. It really helps find that product that's going to land.
I think the uniqueness of where I'm sitting is that I remember what it was like before, and I understand the friction. Like I understand what it was like when you had to sit there with a phone card and dial up and like wait and then be really angry when there was no money on that card, and you couldn't call long distance unlimited around the world, and there wasn't such a thing as Google to look things up. Because I remember when I was a kid and I had to actually go to the library to do book reports and things like that. And that was really annoying. and now I have so much patience for apps that don't work, for screens that don't load, because I remember like the alternative when I was a kid was a self-addressed stamped envelope and 45 days of waiting for a fan club packet to come from my favorite band or something like that. And now you can just watch every video in creation on YouTube. So
yeah. It's crazy. I was trying to tell my daughter, she's 8, about encyclopedias, and she's like, "So you mean it's like Siri?" I was like, "Well, but it's a book, and you had to like look it up to find things." She's like, "You mean like Siri?" I was like, "No, Siri, you just ask." She's like, "Well, isn't that what the book is?" I was like, "Well, yeah, but we didn't have Siri when I was a kid." She's like, "Well, did you have bicycles when you were a kid?"
Yeah.
I was like, yeah. It's just crazy the change that we've gone through and how technology has advanced and where it's going to be, 10 years from now. It's just amazing.
My stepmother called me up this morning and she asked if I wanted my grandfather's first edition Charles Dickens books. And my gut reaction was absolutely. And then my second reaction was, I don't have books anymore in my house. And then my third reaction was, absolutely, I want first edition Charles Dickens books.
Yeah. So you mentioned just briefly that when you travel around and you speak a lot, how did you get into speaking, and what do you think some of the benefits you may have seen from doing that?
So that was actually my coach when I got into coaching was like everyone has to have a mentor coach when you start coaching and you're going through coaching training. So I had an accountability requirement. So like my coach gave me homework basically and said, well, you're not very assertive. You're a CTO and you need to be more assertive. And whether it was because I was a woman or whether because I was a new CTO, it didn't matter. I needed to be more assertive. So what he said to me was, I give you an assignment of within the next 2 weeks, you need to have spoken in public as the lead speaker somewhere. And thankfully I live in Las Vegas and there's plenty of opportunities to do that. But the difficult part was just calling someone up on the phone and just convincing them to let me speak there. again, thankfully, because I'd already had enough of a career that I had things to speak about, that was relatively easy to convince someone. So within 2 weeks, I said, okay, well, I spoke at this business meeting. They were really happy to have me, and great. And he's like, okay, now I want you to do a keynote. And I'm like, how am I going to do a keynote? I haven't spoken anywhere. And he's like, figure it out. So I looked for calls for speakers, and thankfully, like on the internet, like looking for calls for papers and calls for speakers, there's a lot of them. So I just applied all over the place. And within like 2 weeks, I got accepted for a keynote in Morocco. And I'm like, hey, that's awesome. And then like other acceptances started coming in from all over the place, not necessarily for keynotes, but for workshop sessions and for breakouts and other talks. And so soon I had like 37 talks being accepted for that year. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to be a speaker now. And then, so now I average about a talk a week. Sometimes it's like all chunked together, but I've been averaging roughly 50 or so speaking engagements a year ever since.
Wow. So that first one in Morocco, did you have a translator, or was that in English? What was that like?
So that conference is a dual language conference. They speak French and English. And I don't think, no, actually, they've never had any talks there in Arabic. And it's a conference called Devoxx Morocco, and they do a series of events. Devoxx is a conference tour that they have. I think they're up to 15 different events in different countries. And that was my first introduction to the concept of a conference tour. So I went there and I did a keynote, and I just fell in love with the team behind Devoxx, and I ended up becoming an organizer for Devoxx Morocco and also Devoxx UK. But they spoke I did my talk there in English, and there were also people that translated it into French, because that's what they also speak in Morocco.
Cool. So what benefits do you think you've seen by speaking and traveling and being able to, do keynote speeches? What kind of confidence or benefits have you seen come out of that?
There's a lot of tangible and intangible benefits. So tangible benefits are, I no longer say and things when I speak. And one awesome thing is, most of the talks that I give have been recorded at least once, and I put them all on my YouTube channel for people to see. So you can actually see you can see the progress of me as I became a better speaker over time. And you can also see a lot of the education that I give to people around the world. And it's really cool, the different questions that people will ask, because those get recorded as well. So that's cool. That's a benefit that people are actually recording this for posterity, and it becomes educational for other people. And then I also get really cool comments and emails from people that are asking me more questions, that get interested in the topics that I'm talking about. An intangible benefit is that more people are, well, I guess that is an intangible benefit, that more people become interested in these topics that I'm speaking out. One thing that I really love about being a speaker is the other speakers that you get to meet, because you go to a conference and you're now surrounded by all of these experts that really know what they're talking about. And you just get to hang out with them for the entire time of the conference. And a lot of these people have become my close, really good friends. And I even met my fiance at a conference. He and I just met at a speaker dinner and have been together inseparable ever since.
That's awesome. And I agree with you. I always tell people, like, what I get out of conferences doesn't happen necessarily at the sessions. It's in between the sessions.
Yeah.
It's the conversations that you get talking to people in the networking events, the speaker dinners before the conferences start or afterwards. That's where you really get the benefits from the conference, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, and what's really cool is that if you're on a speaker circuit with people or different circuits, you get to see these people around the world, the same people. So I get to travel the world with my best friends, really. And we get to see awesome sites and go places that we never would have gone on our own. So getting asked to come, I was just in Latvia, and I would have never gone to Latvia on my own, but now Latvia is amazing, and I'm just going to tell everybody about how awesome Latvia is.
Speaking of conferences, you're organizing a new conference that's a pretty amazing event. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So like I was saying, people bring you to all sorts of cool places, but one place they don't bring you is Antarctica. So my speaker friends and I, we, what started as a joke, we're like, oh, well, somebody should start a conference in Antarctica. And, me and my partner, we decided to do it. So, we created Antarctic Conf, which is it's a 4-day conference that's happening on a 16-day cruise on, January 5th, 2020. And basically it's a mastermind type event where, all of the speakers and attendees are contributing together to make this event awesome, where we all contribute by using our own expertise to make everybody to give everybody the knowledge that we have. So what's really cool about it is that since there is no internet in the Antarctic, it becomes a 16-day retreat with 4 days of learning. And the people that are already committed to doing this are so spectacular. Like, they are the top in their field. And one of them, he's written books on like nuclear fission and stuff. Oh, wow. So, it's just cool. Everybody that's coming is, like I said, an expert in what they do, and they're so willing to share and learn from everybody else. So it's just going to be a unique event.
Yeah, it sounds pretty amazing. So are you guys actually going to speak on the continent of Antarctica or on a boat, or how does that work?
So because the ship is too big to actually land on Antarctica, what we're going to do is we're having the conference days while we're sailing past Antarctica. It's technically in Antarctic waters. And there's an excursion day where those who choose to can fly and land on Antarctica. And everyone that speaks will get a certificate that says they spoke in Antarctica at the first Antarctic Conf. And then there will also be another excursion for those who want to spend a longer amount of time on Antarctica itself, or go to the South Pole, that we'll arrange for after the ship.
That sounds awesome. That sounds like just like a trip of a lifetime.
Yeah, and we found the most affordable way to do it as well, because normally these excursions are between $15,000 to $30,000 a person, and the ship itself is $3,500 per person, and then the additional landing excursion is only another $3,000 for those that choose to do that. So it's the most affordable way that you'll get to Antarctica. And you'll be doing it again with like amazing people that you'll become friends with for a lifetime.
Wow. That sounds amazing. So how did you guys go about like figuring out the logistics of something like that? It just seems so daunting to figure out that kind of logistics.
So one of my hobbies is travel. It always has been. I have been a licensed travel agent on the side for about 20 years now. Not to make any money from travel. It was just because I wanted access to all of the GDS systems and Sabre and those, because I love it's a numbers thing to me. I like having access to all those codes, and it's data. I like taking in all the data. And I even spent 9 months in between college and getting funding for my first company as a flight attendant. So travel is in my blood. I'm just such a gypsy. So the logistics for this, while it may be daunting for somebody else, it's nothing for me.
Wow. Yeah. It just sounds like it's going to be a great trip. And I couldn't imagine, 16 days just out on sea, it just seems like it's going to be so much fun.
Oh yeah. And I mean, keep in mind, I used to live on a sailboat. So 16 days is, again, that's nothing.
One thing I wanted to talk about today, a little bit was kind of women in tech and what are some things, being that you've gone through this journey, working at startups with entrepreneurs, to, being CTO, fractional CTOs for other companies. What are some of the things that are challenging for women in tech that us men in tech may not know or may not have the perspective of?
Well, I mean, that's a loaded question, John.
Yeah, it is.
One of the main things to keep in mind is that whether they want it to be or not, there is always a spotlight on the woman when it is in a tech company. And no matter how hard anyone on either side tries to make that go away, it's still there. At Evernote, one of the reasons I'm sure that I burned out is because I was always first in, last out. And I never once promoted a woman underneath me because I knew that she wouldn't have been good enough to handle the pressures of Silicon Valley. Like it was, I mean, no matter which woman I hired, it was, unless the one person that I thought would have been cracked when we had a security breach. And I'm like, nope, that was why. I mean, it just reinforced to me why not to have promoted, So women have this thing where if you're not better than the man in the position, then you can't even try. And a lot of women just quit and leave and go into other positions rather than stay because they don't want to deal with the potential harassment claims, of which I had 4 harassment claims over a year filed against me for clothing that I wore, which was the company t-shirts. Yeah, I was wearing the company's issued t-shirts and had sexual harassment claims filed against me for it. So yeah,
mind blowing.
Yeah. So that's the kind of stuff we have to deal with. And it's really, really difficult to put up with things like that, but you just, and you can only keep your head held high for so long.
So what are some things that male leaders can do to try to take that spotlight off a little bit, or maybe lessen some of the pressure? Or is there anything we can do? I
think anything that smacks of favoritism causes bias. So if you try to do something to make people feel better about the women, then the men will feel disenfranchised. If you don't try to do something, then the women will feel bad. So it's a really difficult situation. And unfortunately, the only thing that I see helping is having more, and you probably hear this a lot, having more male allies that will work with women, that will mentor them, that will sponsor them, that will promote them, because the women aren't going to promote the women. The women aren't going to help the women because they're too busy trying their hardest to just stay afloat. So it's not, but the men have to do it in such a way as to not show favoritism, or else the other men in the company will cry foul. Yeah. So it's really, really delicate.
It is. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, one of the things I try to do whenever resumes or something come in and I'm hiring is I don't even look at the names. I want to be, biased at all, whether it's a male, female, whatever race, gender, I try not to be biased on any of that. I just want to see what are the qualifications, what does this person have, and I was recently talking to a lady on the podcast, and she was telling me that some of the wording on the actual resumes will be different between men and women, just because of the heritage, the way people were brought up. They may say I assisted with instead of I led, and some of the things you need to pay attention to that I never really thought about. It just never occurred to me that the language may be different as well.
Yeah, women use the word just a lot more than men do, for example. And it's something that, so women use a lot of non-assertive words. There are definite things that even in blind hiring practices that you can tell if somebody is female versus male. But then you've got applicant tracking systems that are knocking people out before they even get to a blind hiring, because people don't have the skill sets that they necessarily would. And another thing, when you've got, for example, in our field, you've got those coder tests, like they're generally skewed more towards men, because, I mean, and I know this seems weird, but a lot of them, because they are written by men, if you look across the board, women do not score as high on those tests. But
I never thought about that, but you're right. Really, any test, if it's written, by a certain group, is going to be more favorable to people taking it from that group.
Yeah. And people argue, oh, well, it's coding. Anyone should do well on coding. It's because it's agnostic, but like, in even things like foo beer, like women are like, why are you using beer and things? So if you have to think like an extra second before typing something, then you score lower. So
that's a really good point. Again, something I never thought about that never would have crossed my mind if I didn't have these conversations. And that's one of the things I'm trying to do in this month of October to encourage or just to make more a higher awareness of women in technology. We're having a lot of technology leaders on the podcast this month, and we're also going to be donating a lot of our stuff to breast cancer. And I know that's something that's dear to your heart. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah. So my mother actually had breast cancer, and while she recovered from it initially, a couple of years afterwards, she passed away from complications from the radiation that put her into remission. So one thing I found out afterwards was that this is actually quite common for breast cancer survivors, that the chemotherapy, the radiation, can cause a lot of harm to the body, and it weakens you. And actually, while it gives you a few extra years, it definitely decreases your overall quality of life. So I wouldn't have known that until my mom went through it herself. And I'm so glad we had extra years with her. But I definitely hope that we come up with some way to remove, to cure breast cancer overall, so that we don't have to lose people twice.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, we're trying to encourage more people to donate. So if you go to geekleader.com/breast cancer, it'll redirect you off to the National Society for Breast Cancer for donations there. And just want everybody to, be cognizant of October being Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And, go ahead and pledge before the holidays, donate what you can now, and help out the cause and help us get more research that obviously needs to be done so we can get a cure for this disease.
Great.
Are there any other tips or advice that you have for leaders out there today that can help them become better leaders, or some things that maybe they should know that they don't learn in school or in a book?
So one of the things that people should know to be a better leader in general is that you really need to pay attention to yourself first. If you're not listening to the cues that you are getting internally, like if you're hungry, if you're tired, if you're angry, if there's anything going wrong with you, that's absolutely going to affect your presence externally. So you need to keep yourself under control. You need to manage yourself before you can lead others. And once you learn that, once you learn self-management, then you can be a really strong presence in other people's lives. Another tip is to actually understand what your purpose is, what your driving force. I always call it the unicorn power, the thing that drives you, that makes you get up in the morning and fills you with light and joy. And for some people, it's getting on a mountain and skiing. And for other people, it's just drinking coffee, their favorite coffee. Whatever it is, like, let that fill you, and then other people will sense that and really follow whatever you say. And those two things together, self-management and having a passion that drives you, not necessarily following your passion. I mean, you don't have to be skiing down a mountain every minute, but like having that feeling of what it's like to be skiing while you're talking about whatever you're talking about, that is like, those are the two main keys to being a good leader.
Yeah, no, I think the self-management piece, that's one thing that it took me a long time to figure out, self-awareness and the importance of understanding the things that make me a high level, functioning at my highest level. And once I figured that out, the leadership stuff got a lot easier. And then understanding your purpose and your, what do you call the unicorn power? I think that's awesome. My daughter's all into unicorns. She's going to be a unicorn for Halloween. So I think she's going to be pretty stoked when I tell her I talked to a unicorn whisperer today. So I really appreciate having you on the show. How can people find out more about, this conference, your talks? I want to obviously link some things up in the show notes, but is there any other way that they can find out more about you? So
I'm pretty easy to find. I'm Heathriel on pretty much every single social media. Antarctic Conf is antarcticconf.com, and I'm also heathriel.com. You can find me. So yeah, I'm out there.
All right. Well, I appreciate having you on the show.
Thank you for having me.